We are not designing pages. We are designing systems of components. Stephen Hay said this back in 2012. And the statement came at a time when our industry was worried about the scale and complexity that was rapidly coming at us. Mobile phone makers were unleashing new devices and new form factors on the market at a crazy pace. And we were understanding that the way we were working and the way we were thinking about designing websites, this idea of pages and templates, had been fine to get us to that point, but was not going to be sufficient for the devices that were already in the market and those that were going to come. Something had to change. We needed a better way to think about and work in large teams to build cohesive suites of products. We needed a better way to think about how we work together in large teams and build cohesive suites of products for one organization. We needed to figure out how we were going to build and design and build for devices and form factors of the day and all of those that would come in the future in a sustainable way. We needed to codify and simplify simple decisions that had already been made that would come up every time on a new design project. So we evangelized, we advocated, and we got buy-in from our stakeholders and our peers about this new way of working, this idea of having design systems, and that included components and design decisions that would make it easy for designers and developers to do the right thing and harder for them to make products that diverged from the prime purpose of the brand and of the product. But we were realistic. We understood that design systems were not a panacea or a silver bullet that would solve all our ills. Difficult design and development work still needed to happen to make great products. And we did experiments. We shared our findings. We wrote blogs. We spoke at conferences, and we published podcasts. We built new tools that would make it easy for us to create, maintain, and evolve design systems. And ultimately, we became systems thinkers, and we built robust design systems that could survive brand redesigns, new technologies, new platforms, new products that would come along. I don't know if I would be going too far to say that if it wasn't for that shift in thinking, if design systems hadn't come along, the tech industry as we know it would not have been this big. And dare I say that even our jobs would not exist in the way that we think about them today. Many of the products that you and I enjoy using today would not exist if we hadn't had that shift from designing pages to designing systems of components. Beyond saving our jobs in the industry, there's a greater benefit that I think we yet to realize from this paradigm shift. We didn't just change the way we were working. We changed the way we were thinking. We became systems thinkers. We are people who, when presented with a problem, rather than looking for the straight line path to the solution, we more readily can see the interconnectedness of all the aspects of a problem space. And we are able to try and model and understand how that system works so that we can move it and manipulate it and manage it in such a way that we can have positive and lasting change. And I think it is this systems thinking that is critical to us solving one of the long-standing and more important problems that the tech industry has been facing and that 2020 has highlighted for us, which is the challenge of people and how we work well together. 2020 has been a trip, ain't it? I mean, so much has changed. Apparently, this is how we do conferences now. I am in my basement. My kids are sleeping upstairs. And this room where I'm at right now in the basement, this isn't just where I do my conferences. This is where I work now. I spend 7-8 hours a day here. And I'm not sure, am I working from home or am I living at work? In between meetings, I'm doing daycare. I am, helping out with the laundry. I am dashing out to the shop because we've run out of milk. I'm helping with homework. I'm trying to fix the Wi-Fi. This is not just me, but many of us who've been forced to stay at home. This is the life that we live now. And what's I found interesting about this change is that going to the office has hidden the relationship between our work lives and our outside lives. I've been in so many calls with pets, with relatives, with all kinds of people that my team members live with. It's become clear that this old idea that, and I'm calling it old, this idea that a team is just a group of individuals is a falsehood that the corporate setup that we have when we go to work has kind of, put on us, and we've believed for a long time. But now that the boundaries are blurred, we're starting to understand that it's an old way of thinking. Instead, we can benefit from thinking of our teams as systems, because ultimately the people who we work with are part of a family system, which has been invisible to an extent because they've been working in an office. But now in 2020, we're not able to avoid that. Moreover, if you read Systems Thinking by Donella Meadows, you'll hear her say that a team is a system. So when I read this idea that a team is a system, I started to wonder, could we use system thinking and the tools that we already have for managing and operating our design systems to manage and operate our team systems? Many great books about design systems have been written since the idea surfaced back in 2012. One of my favorites is Designing Systems by Alla Kolmatova. It was published by the awesome people at Smashing Magazine. And in it, Alla puts forward this idea that an effective design system has 4 key components: purpose, principles, patterns, and a shared language. And today I'm going to share with you how I've been using those 4 foundations as a way to manage a team system. Let me ask you, what is your design system's purpose? Now, you might say something like, well, we created a design system so that we can make it hard for engineers, designers, and product people to make the wrong decision for our product and easier for them to do the right thing. And I'll be like, cool, yeah, that's what your design system does. But what is the purpose of your design system? And this sounds a bit like a trick question, but ultimately, we can easily see that the components of a design system are put together ultimately to create some kind of product. So it seems like it follows that the purpose of that product should also be the purpose of our design system. The product's purpose should drive the design and development decisions that we make as we evolve and manage our design systems. But what about in a team? How can purpose play a role there? Well, imagine there's Team A and Team B, and you've got the option of joining one of the two, right? So Team A has a pitch that goes something like this. We are the analytics team, and this is our roadmap, and this is what we're looking to build over the next few quarters. And these are our KPIs, and as you can see, they're looking great. And these are our dashboards that we use to monitor those KPIs. And we'd love it if you can join us. We've got a great roadmap, and we've had great success, and our product is looking healthy. It's going to be fantastic to have you join us. That's Team A, right? And then along comes Team B, and they say, we're the analytics team, and we exist to make sure that all of our customers can find the exact data that they need to make critical business decisions using our product. To see how well we're doing at that, we use this set of KPIs, and we use this dashboard to monitor those KPIs. And this is the roadmap of the next few features that we think we're going to be working on and rolling out that are going to help us to meet that purpose. So, Team A, Team B. Which of those sounds great to you? I'm guessing it's probably Team B. And it's because of the why. Simon Sinek, author of Start With Why, talks about how when he's studied the best teams in the world, he's found that the ones that are the most successful and the ones that are most satisfied working together have a compelling why, a compelling reason to exist. And that compelling reason is typically rooted in how that team is going to serve or provide value to other people. The teams who have this compelling why, he says, they are the teams that produce the best results, and they stick together for the longest time. So yes, a good set of KPIs, a feature that needs building, or the CEO's blessing is a fantastic reason for your team to exist. But an effective team system, just like a design system, needs a clear purpose, a why that drives decisions on how the system should be structured, how it should operate, and ultimately how it should evolve so that it can stay successful. Tone, content, and error messages. These are 3 basic components that you'll find in most design systems. But how do we combine them together? And how do we do that at scale when you've got many teams working on many products? How do we make sure that everybody who's doing their work on this product will combine tone, content, and error messages in a way that is cohesive and feels like it is well considered and intentional and true to the brand and the purpose of the products that are being made? Well, Alla Kolmatova says to us that we need to have design principles, a shared set of guidelines that capture the essence of what good design means for the product and advice on how to achieve that. She goes on to say that good design principles are authentic and genuine. They have to be easy for us to believe that they are true to the product and true to the brand. They have to be actionable and practical. So when we see the design principles and when we try to use them to make decisions, it must be very easy to understand what to do next without requiring too much interpretation. They must take a point of view. They must not try to be all things to all people, but rather they take a position that says, on this product, on this brand, we say or we convey our error messages in this way that is distinct from all other ways. And lastly, they have to be relatable and memorable, because if we can't remember them, then how the hell are we going to implement them, right? So when you have a great set of principles in place, then you can make product design and engineering decisions that are aligned. And when we think back to the tone, the content, the error messages, it'll be easy for engineers, and designers across the entire team, across the entire organization, to say something like, we combine our tone and our content in this way for our error messages because our brand or our product values clarity over efficiency. So in this case, the principles are telling us the relationship between tone, content, and error messages. In the same way, principles can tell us how a component or a pattern should appear or behave. Think about animation motion design, for example, where we might move a modal window in a way that conveys speed, or that conveys luxury, or that conveys playfulness, depending on the principles that are behind our product. So in this way, we find that a well-curated set of principles articulate what we value and tell us how we can achieve that value through our decision-making. So how could principles be helpful to us as we think about teams as systems? Well, let's look at three things that we do on most teams. We communicate, we make decisions, and we share feedback. When it comes to communicating, you might sit in an office together. Now, is it okay to just walk up to somebody and tap them on the shoulder and have a discussion with them while they're working? Or is it more preferred that you send them a Slack message or an email so that they can reply to you at their convenience? In the one way, you tap them on the shoulder, you get speed. In the other way, you're being more considerate of how that person works. How do y'all do it? Is it decided up front, or is it just organic? It depends on person to person. What about decision making? Does the boss or do the leadership team, do they make the core decisions about how the team works? Or does the team have a say in the decisions that are ultimately going to affect them? When it comes to feedback, is it okay to give positive and negative feedback out in the open, either in front of a group or in an open Slack channel? Or is it more preferable that if you want to give negative feedback, you might do that in a more private setting or send it via a DM? When you think about how these things happen in your team, do you know who decided that they should work that way? Was it done by intent, or is it organic? Or do you join and it's, just the way that it's worked ever since? Earlier this year, I joined a new team and we decided to leave none of that to chance. We wanted to be intentional about how the team communicates, how we make decisions, how we build trust, how we share feedback, and how we celebrate successes and learn from our failures. And so we ran a series of workshops, and they went something like this. So for each of those 5 things that I mentioned, we would ask 2 key questions to start with. The first one is, what does it look like when you worked in a team where communication sucked? And so this was the most fun part, where people, would come up with, terrible stories about how things, didn't really work out. Then the second step was then asking, okay, cool, if that's how we don't want it to work, what does it look like and what do we want it to look like in our team when we communicate well? And again, we'd gather everybody's ideas. Once we had answered those 2 questions, we then asked everybody to vote anonymously on those positive ways of communicating that the team had gathered together. Once the votes were in, then we went through an exercise of seeing what floated to the top, what the team seemed to find most important, and then we summarized those and expressed them in very succinct ways. And they said things like, when we decide, we make sure that everyone knows what decisions need to be made by when, and we document and share decision outcomes and rationale. When dealing with feedback and critique, we frame and deliver feedback in a caring way. We give clear and direct feedback, and we ask for feedback on specific issues. When I look back at these, I realize that these are just like design principles, except they're for team systems. Let's call them team principles. They make clear what great collaboration looks like for the team, and they give guidance on how to achieve that. Now, it's important to note here that great team principles are not like a code of conduct where it comes from HR or one person in the group writes it and everybody else has to comply. But rather, the entire group has to work together to actually come up with these, because it is in the process of having those discussions that we start to have a shared understanding of what matters to each of us as individuals, and then we come to a consensus on what matters to us as a group. And it is this process that gives the team ownership of the principles and makes it easy for them to hold each other to account as they make decisions and as they work, using these principles as a guide. A well-defined set of team principles make it easy for team members to understand how to relate together and how to work together in a way that embodies what the team values and ultimately supports the team's purpose. The bulk of the content of most common design systems is the patterns, the pattern library, a pattern being a building block that enables and encourages certain user behavior in the UI. And when you start your design system, you want to start to see what patterns your product will need and your design system will need to include so that you can support the development of the product. And a great way to do that is to do the good old interface inventory, made famous by the homie Brad Frost. And to do an interface inventory, what you will do is you will decide on a kind of pattern that you want to collect instances of. So let's say you want to find modal windows. And then you will open up your products, all its instances across all the different devices, and you will screenshot all of the instances of modal windows that you find. So you screenshot all these things and you gather them up in your design tool of choice. You're going to throw up a little bit, and then you're going to organize these and start to understand why and how they differ. And most importantly, you will start to make sense of this mess. Once you've got a good idea of what the different variations your product needs, you will then start to design some patterns for modal window, for example. And those are the ones that you'll ultimately circulate within your organization. And when they reach a certain level of maturity, you're going to document those and put them in your design system. And then you lather, rinse, repeat. You do this for all the different patterns that your product needs, and you keep adding them to your pattern library. And that is how your pattern library grows. For a team, where do patterns come into play? I'm still testing this idea out, but here's what I'm thinking. I reckon that in teams, patterns are the practices, rituals, and ceremonies that you observe. Things like how you onboard somebody, how you celebrate birthdays, how you celebrate promotions, how we decide who gets promoted or who gets hired in our team. There are many rituals from the time that you join to the time that you leave a team that are observed either as individuals or that we observe as groups, going on offsites, for example, doing retros. And some of these have organically evolved. Some of them are mandated by the organization or by HR. And then some of them have just organically developed. Do you know in your team where the rituals and processes come from? The reason why it's important to understand is that some of these rituals may not be what the team wants or what the team needs, but may just be what the team does. And so we need to get a clear understanding of what is happening, how the team works, and how the team practices rituals and ceremonies so that we can decide which ones we want. The same thing that we might do for an interface inventory. So why don't we try an inventory, right? If we take a leaf out of the design systems playbook, we run a practice inventory where we look at all the practices that the team and rituals and ceremonies that the team observes from the time somebody joins to the time that they bounce. And we catalog exactly what is happening in each one of them. And then we try to understand where it's come from, the purpose it serves in our team, and we can make some decisions about what we want to keep. And if there is something that we want to keep, then we can define exactly how we want that practice to work. And this is critical because this gives us the opportunity to define things like how do we make sure that each of the practices that we have in our team are inclusive, for example. In my mind, this is a great way to allow us to intentionally build the practices and culture of our team in a way that will make sure that we stop leaving people out, we stop leaving people behind, but we intentionally make sure that we are doing things that align with the values of our team. To be clear, this isn't about rigorous policy development where we mandate corporate birthday fund related activities, but rather it's about acknowledging that just like with design systems, when we have a little bit of structure, we are able to encourage and enable desirable behavior while making sure that we're intentional about how we want to behave around our work. And isn't that something worth doing? I had someone join my team earlier this year, and they spent the first 2 weeks, doing the induction thing, getting machines set up, drinking all the Kool-Aid, joining all the Slack channels. And then once they were, joining the team proper, they started going through calendars. And then we were having a discussion, and they were like, cool. So I've just noticed that there's some kind of a sprint that's happening next week. And also I've noticed that in our Slack channels, we do a stand-up with a Slack bot. Is there a way that you can point me to our agile boards and let me know, when do we do our sprint planning? And I was like, okay. So we do use the word sprint, but actually it's not a sprint. It's actually more just like a couple of days where we do a focused deep dive on these navigation issues. And we call it a stand-up, but actually it's just like an update for your teams, tell everybody what you're working on and, to check if there are any blockers. But we don't actually do agile. I know, sorry, it's confusing. We're using the words, but we don't actually run agile in our team. Y'all know from working on design systems, naming tokens, naming CSS classes, naming components, that naming things is hard. But we know that it's worth the effort, because if we don't have a shared language in our design system, it will be difficult for people to do the right thing. And it will be difficult for people to know how to use the system effectively. In effective team systems, the same problem exists. And yes, we expect people to bring prior knowledge to the team. So if you've worked on Agile before, if you've heard of stand-ups, that's great. We want to have you join us. But we also have to acknowledge that if there are nuanced ways in which we use language that is common in the industry, but is different to us, there's the opportunity for there to be friction and confusion. They're like the example that I just cited. So again, why don't we take a leaf out of the design systems playbook? Ala Kolmatova recommends that a team have a glossary where they define and write down all the terms that are unique to this team or to this product that might be common in the rest of the world, but have a nuanced meaning here. We gather those things, and when people learn about the design system, they can also have an opportunity to learn about the specifics of the language and why it works in a certain way. She cites an example of Intercom, where at Intercom, they have a glossary that everybody, has to know and understand, so that they make sure everyone in the organization, from the designers right up to the frontline people talking to the customers, everyone is using the same word to mean the same thing in the same way. So we could do this, and you could do this for your team. When there are terms that are common to the industry, but may be used in a specific way in your team, you can capture those words. Not every single word that your team uses, but rather the ones that might be sources of confusion. You can capture those, right? And then you can give them and share them with people who are onboarding your team, and give them a chance to start off in a way that is free from the kind of friction that might come when we are making assumptions about the meanings of the words that we're using on our teams. So just like in a design system, an effective team system, a system for collaboration, needs a shared language that people can learn when they join, they can easily understand, and then they can evolve as the need arises and as the team grows. So, purpose, principles, patterns, and shared language. Why don't you try them out in your team? You don't even have to be a lead. You just need to be a systems thinker, and you already work on design systems. And then share what you learn and let everybody kind of have a view of how it's working out with you. Our industry needs a new way to understand and think about the ways in which we can work together effectively as the world changes and evolves in new and unexpected ways. And I think that managing our teams as systems is a way to build resilient teams that will last. A team is not just a group of individuals. It is a system of collaboration, and we can use systems thinking to bring positive and lasting change to the way that we work. Let's do this. Peace.
Right, that was so good.
Yo, man. Thanks, man.
I have a quick question for you. What do you call a can opener that doesn't work?
Can't opener?
Yeah, you got it. Awesome. That was such a great talk. I love the idea of mapping design system concepts that usually relate to kind of the technical bits and bobs to the team itself. One of the things you mentioned was that most successful teams have compelling reasons, right? So that comes from this book, The Start with Why. Do you have any examples off the top of your head of teams that have had compelling purposes and compelling whys that maybe you could share?
I think the thing that I found works the best is when we have, like I mentioned in my talk, like there's a bunch of KPIs and things like that that are measuring where we're trying to go. But that analytics example is very close to a team that I worked on previously. And the idea was that we wanted to understand what is the real problem that our customers really, really have that we're trying to solve. And in doing that, we were able to watch the metrics change, watch the organization change its roadmaps, but the reason for the team to exist kind of, continue to subsist. So that reason that I shared is one of the real ones that really worked for me, which was, our customers use the dashboard we create to make critical business decisions. And so when we had their personas or when we had their photos in the office, it's about, making sure that those people are sitting there, they're running their businesses and they're trying to make, things real. And I think that's one of the clearest examples that I have that comes to mind.
Yeah, gotcha. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits to having design system KPIs match product KPIs or organizational KPIs, and also the dangers of that? Like, should they be exactly the same? Where should they be different? Where should they overlap? Should they be one and the same?
For design systems, you mean?
Yeah, for design
specifically.
Yep.
I think that not the KPIs specifically, but the purpose, right? Mm-hmm. So the purpose of the system and the purpose of the product, I think, needs to be one and the same because the pieces of the product are distributed throughout the system. So those things should be the same. But the effectiveness of the product versus the effectiveness of a design system, they're gonna be different. Right. So, the system is trying to help teams make the right thing quicker, easily, more easily, whereas the product has got a different set of KPIs. So I think the purposes should be like this, but in terms of the KPIs, I think, they can be different. Although I guess there are points where they can align. I haven't thought about that much, but yeah, the purposes, same, KPIs can differ.
That makes total sense. So measure them differently across the different kinds of teams, but shared overlapping purposes.
Yeah.
That's great. Eileen asked in the chat, kind of during your talk, what do you do when you take a position on principles, but then users disagree with that position?
When users disagree with the position on principles?
Yeah.
So I've not seen many situations where the principles that we use to make design and development and product decisions are intentionally exposed to our customers. Is that right? But even if they disagree, I guess they'll vote with their dollars. But the principles are not necessarily something that we are selling, but they are using us to drive their decision. So if the principles led us to make a design decision or a development decision that ultimately the customers disagree with, then we're going to see that in the performance of the product. And that's how it's going to play out. But I think in terms of them pointing out and saying, this principle is wrong, the thing I can see happening is them saying, you say you stand for this principle, but when I use your product, I see your product doing this. Right. And these things don't tend to align. And then that's when we have the open conversations and the critical conversations to say, yes, the principles do guide our decisions, but they're not hard and fast rules. And also we will find that principles conflict where you're like, yeah, I need to be clear, but I need to be fast. And how do you, sometimes you have to make trade-offs, in those places. So I think, I can see how they might conflict in the manifestation of the product.
Yeah, I guess the other version too is when users kind of point that out and it makes the organization go like, actually, you know what? Yeah, you're right. We need to go and revisit.
We need to. Absolutely. Yeah. We're not living true to what we're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Does your answer change if you think about users as not users of the end product, but maybe users of the design system? So like internal designers, developers, product managers, do you have kind of the same opinion, or does that change your mind about it?
I think then at that point, because they are stakeholders in the product that we're trying to make, then I think the point that you raised, which is like, let's have a discussion about why you're seeing it differently from the way we're seeing it. When we came up with these principles, this is the path we took and we got to this point. But if there is new information that you have that kind of causes us to rethink this and go, actually, we need to rethink this, then, we have to take that opportunity, and, they're in the organization, so we should have the opportunity to have that discussion. And then if not, then I think it's again trying to say, here's the reason why we stick to these principles, and here's the reason why maybe they haven't manifested in the right way in this particular instance.
Got it. One thing that I love about your talk is that you kind of talked about how the discussion of the principles is sometimes just as important, or not, or maybe sometimes more important than the output of the principles itself, right? So it's that whole idea of like the journey is just as important as the destination. What do you do with people who aren't part of that journey, right? So like you hire a new employee and those discussions have been had by the team prior to them joining, or something like that. Right. What are some good ways to kind of catch them up, or like still make them feel included, even though they weren't part of the journey of establishing these principles?
So one of the things that I've done in the past is what we do is when we share the principles with them, we ask them to not just read and sign on the bottom, but rather to do an active review of them. Right. And so this is them bringing up where they like, well, actually, this works or this doesn't work, or I don't understand why this has got to this point. Them doing a review and almost like a critique of them creates an opportunity for us to get their perspective on them. So what did you think about this? And then to engage them in discussion around their perspective. And in that way, they are not only consuming it, but we can help to get better buy-in through those conversations. And also we could learn something new where it's kind of like, well, actually, maybe we do need to, add this, change this, or, or remove that.
Yep. Got it. During your talk, there was a lot of kind of conversation in the chat of people going like, I miss Teams. You're sort of making people nostalgic for Teams. Maybe that's a COVID-related thing. Maybe that's some people that used to work on larger teams and then have moved to maybe smaller teams, or maybe they're a team of one there. Do you have any advice for people who don't have a team? Maybe they're a team of one. Maybe they can't work with their teams as readily now because of COVID and social distancing. Do you have any tips and tricks for people like that?
I think in terms of teams of one, I guess you are, on one hand, it's cool. Hopefully you agree with yourself, on all these things, but obviously, missing the interaction with other people, that's a really tough thing. Like I'm sitting in my basement. This is what we do now. We hang out like this. I think what's happened with teams that have become more distributed is I think this situation, if anything, has caused us to have to rethink what we see as collaboration and what we see as kind of, the relationships between teams. Because if you previously were working in a physically co-located space, then the relationship that you have and the signals that, help us to tell each other that, you matter to me and I matter to you and we work together. Those were, happening at the, at the lunch table or at the coffee machine and all those things. And now we have to more actively kind of send those messages out. And so I think definitely making time for non-work conversations, even though it might be in a worky kind of way. And when I say worky kind of way, it's like, yes, we may have to set up a meeting for this. You know what I mean? And we have to put it on the calendar, which isn't what we used to do before. But this is the way that it's going to happen. And also like making time outside of, during work, as opposed to let's wait until after work for this, but rather to say, you know what, this was going to happen if we bumped into each other at 11:37 at the coffee machine. So, let's make that time during work hours and, and still, make time to hang out and just talk and share whatever it is that's, that's meaningful. And also having conversation starters or conversation, and this again sounds weird, but it's awkward because it feels like you're in a meeting, right? And so you almost have to intentionally, sometimes plan to not talk about work and have something else that's planned. And so, some teams are like, we will watch a movie the night before and then let's hang out and kind of, let's do a bad review of that movie, or, so it's things like that I think can be helpful to help build those, those things that we're missing because of, the way the world is right now.
Yeah, got it. One of the things that our teams are doing a lot is they're sending a little bit of money, 20 or 30 bucks to each team member, and asking them to buy themselves dinner, and then they'll do kind of a dinner conversation, and then they do fun kind of activities. Like some of the teams started to name themselves and do like Mad Lib exercises to kind of like get the camaraderie and the spirit going, kind of bring them together before engaging in like a work thing. Joanna in the chat mentioned something related where she's like excited to try some of these ideas. And you talked about this already a little bit already. So she said, do you have any tips for doing specifically a principal session or a team pattern inventory remotely? So you mentioned some of that already. Any additional tips for doing those kinds of activities?
I think definitely for the team principals, having a workable group of people working. So when we did ours, there was about 15 of us, and you can't get all 15 kind of working. So the facilitation things that we're learning when you facilitate remotely, which is break the group up into like groups of 5 and things like that. And then everybody has got, some input that they want to give in, and then you kind of bring the group back and everybody feeds in and everybody reviews. And you may have to braid and unbraid over a period of time, as you kind of work on these principles. So I think definitely smaller groups, so that everybody has that input and then kind of roll it up again. That's an important one with the principles, but definitely everybody who is on the team at the time should be in those sessions, not just leadership or the people who are interested in this, or something like that. And then with the audits, I think making time to think about what those steps are, or giving everyone the opportunity to think through what those things are. Have we lost? So have I gone off?
I hear you still. Your video is frozen.
Cool.
Good
back on.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So making time for giving everybody an opportunity to think before the session starts. So, making clear we're thinking about all the different patterns of collaboration, and you give some examples. Everybody thinks, whether it's offline or even if we're just connected, but we're muted. That just gives everybody an opportunity to think before the influences come in. Because one of the weird things about working on like a Miro or some shared board is that I can no longer scribble my notes in private as I normally would in a workshop if I had some post-it notes in front of me. Because now I'm seeing, oh, that person's already writing this. Oh, that was mine. That I wanted to write up. Or, so I think just making time for people to think quietly before they actually contribute. That's another kind of a good practice for those stuff.
Very cool. We got a few minutes left, so I'll do one more question from the chat. Doug asked in Slido, how do you reinvent your team when you're clearly doing it wrong? So kind of a systemic question there. You got any tips about that?
Doing it wrong. What do you reckon that could mean then? Is doing it wrong like working badly, or is like, are we making a bad product?
Yeah, I don't know. I like your speculations. And Doug, if you want to chime in that about the context too, but yeah, I like those as reasons. Maybe you can react to that.
Yeah. So I guess if we are making the wrong thing, so our purpose is kind of off. The best thing is to start at making sure that there's trust in the team to have that conversation. Because if there is not enough trust between the people on the team to have that conversation, it could easily break down and seem as if when you're raising that you're trying to destroy the team, as opposed to being a person who is, I'm deeply interested in us working well together. And the reason I'm raising this is so that we can kind of maybe take a minute to step back and think through what we're doing, how we're doing it, so that, we can, be a fantastic team. So having that trust, and then reevaluating that purpose and bring it up and saying, is this purpose really what we want? Here are some examples of how we don't align with that purpose, or, how the things we're measuring and the purpose that we have isn't aligned, or even what the hell is the purpose? We don't actually have one that's articulated. The boss wants this, but, is that really a purpose? But I think starting from a place of, I'm trying to help the team build, as opposed to I'm just bringing some, critique because I just went to this conference and heard about this thing, and so I think that trust and building that trust is a thing. And again, we're people of design systems. We get this whole idea of trying to sell things in. It's we're doing it all the time. We're doing it all the time, and so it's continuing to use that in terms of what's happening. In terms of the team dynamic, that can be more challenging because then again, is it the behavior of people on the team or things like that? But I think the same principle applies, which is, I'm coming from a place of love, and I want this to be amazing. I'm seeing X, Y, and Z, and that seemed to take away from the amazing that we're trying to reach. So, can we make some time to talk about it? And I've got some new tools that I've learned about that I think we could have a look at and see if you guys think they're helpful to getting us to this point. Then let's all gather together and let's, all the folks in here can contribute to making the improvement that we would all love to see.
That's very cool. It's so amazing how that's not design system stuff. That's not teams. That's conflict resolution stuff, right? Just kind of stating your intention and saying this is the place that I'm coming from. Let's connect on that first, and then we can connect on the technical bits of it. Farai, are you up for a little game? Maybe we can end this a little bit in a fun and silly way. Are you down with that?
Bring it on.
All right, here we go. So we're gonna do a little lightning round. I love that your talk kind of mapped design system ideas to teams. So I want to throw out a random design system term, and I want you to 10 seconds to say what you think it might relate to in teams. Are you cool with that?
I'm going to give it a shot.
All right, here we go. First one, maintenance.
So making sure that all the tools and things that we use to keep our team flowing well, that they are in place and that they work well.
Nice. React.
Don't. Or if you do, take a minute. You're going to have your reaction, then breathe, think about what that reaction means. Why am I happy? Why am I sad? Why am I angry about this? And then respond.
Awesome. Atomic design.
So this is the breaking things down into parts and seeing that, the patterns that we have and the way that we work, there could be a way for us to break these things down and put them together so that we understand that all these things come together to make, all these meetings are made of all these similar parts. And if we could have, every meeting's got an agenda. Let's make a great agenda. Every meeting has notes. Let's take great notes.
So good. JSX.
Don't have any of it in your team.
Well done. Design tokens.
I thought about this. I couldn't because unfortunately the word token is loaded, right? So then I was just like, snap. Yeah, that's gonna go in a place that you don't want it to go. That was That was my first thought. Yeah.
Well done. That's a good touch. All right, last one. UI kit.
Wear bow ties like this that are made of UI in your meetings. That'll be great.
Okay, Farai, you are awesome. Thank you for that great talk. Thank you so much for a great clarity talk. What a great way to start the day.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks to everybody who is seen and unseen who's made this amazing. Appreciate it.